Hey, and we are live with Susan. Susan has spent 30 years in the front line of social service work, mainly in the mental health field, as well as supporting people living with an acquired brain injury. I don't know if you know anything about acquired brain injury. We did do some concussion work with Amelia a couple of weeks ago, and that was some very interesting stuff. We talked about uh, post concussion syndrome, which is a very serious thing that Amelia and her son has had to deal with. So right now, Susan's priorities have been the marginalized people who are our neighbors who have been displaced in our community. She works with PATH quite a bit. Was one of the founding members of the steering committee of PATH, and right now they've taken some hits. Unfortunately, right now they haven't been able to get the land that they're looking for. I know we were talking to Scott last week, and Scott was saying that they're looking for a place to place the homes. We did get a lot of information from Scott last week about what's going to be there and what kind of, that it's not going to be just a tent city. It's going to be something a little bit more exciting, a little bit more in depth, a little bit more supportive than what we were expecting. Like, I know Pat and I were both thinking that it was just going to be another tent city and that we might be stuck with needles everywhere and stuff like that. And I know that one of the other individuals we talked with last week was saying the same thing, that they're, when's enough? We need to start, just shut down these tent cities, and they'll be able to go to Brock Mission, and they'll be able to go to the Yes program and stuff like that. I'm not sure that's the solution that we're looking for, but that is one of the directives that one of the people that we talked to last week was really looking at, because he felt that there was a place for them to go. But I'd really like to bring Susan in the conversation here. And Susan, you've been doing a lot with PATH. You started at the ground floor with PATH. I'm really excited about what they're doing. I'd like to get into Kitchener and Kingston and see what they're doing there. I'd like to see some of the video on that, because it sounds like some amazing stuff going on down in that area as well. Maybe you can explain a little bit of what you know about PATH and what you're expecting to happen here in the near future.
Well, first of all, mentioning Kitchener and Kingston, we just spoke with Crystal Wilson this morning on a call from Kingston, the manager there, and they have a program that is fully supported and funded through their city of really high-end, hardcore, indestructible tiny homes. And yeah, they've had their ups and downs, but people are safe and housed, and I think they're going to be expanding. And we've been lucky enough to have them, Crystal, and from Kitchener we've been there and visited their site, and we really have some mentors. We have Nadine, who's sort of the den mother in their 50 cabin site, and we've it and watched, seen their videos. But there's really kind of a community of mentors that and supports for each other. And Hamilton, now Belleville, is starting. They're kind of maybe around at the same stage we are, kind of thing. So we try to see what they're doing, share information, share strategies and ideas and tools. So it's sort of not reinventing the wheel. And with PATH, I mean, we started in September of 2021, and sort of came together sort of out of the pandemic, when we, going around talking to our friends on the street and some advocates that I know through, my work and so on, and just what I've done as a volunteer, and just noticing, when times were hard that first summer in COVID, there was no water to be had. The washrooms weren't open, and you just thought, wow, it's a hard time out there. And then what do homeless people do? What do our friends out there do? And so we talk about some of these things, and we get together for a coffee and chat about it. And then one fellow, an advocate who helps people all the time, who's in and out of homelessness himself, he brought this movie to us, this film called Community First, A Home for the Homeless, and showed it to us. And the model in that really struck us. And because it came from him and his friends, were saying, wouldn't it be great if we could build a community, starting with little cabins or tiny homes, and grow it into a larger community, and that sort of intertwined and enmeshed with the big community of Peterborough, to the point where everybody knew their neighbors. The people who were formerly homeless, met up and got to know their neighbor down on, Aylmer Street or down on Monaghan.
Yeah.
So it started to break down, and it just really moved us. So over a few months, we started showing this film through Zoom when we couldn't go out anywhere. And we started sort of building this groundswell of support. People said, that is a great idea, because it wasn't just the cabins. It was support. It was people supporting each other. And then they built a social enterprise. They had community gardens. They had an art house. They had a blacksmith shop. They had it grew. So there was work for people. There was things to do. They had a clinic came and established itself. So this was in Texas, which is mind you different, but the idea being the same. They could be adapted to fit any community based on who they are and what their needs are. So that was what really inspired us to think, you know what, I could see that working here. We have so much and so many people that say, well, what can I do? What could I do to help people to get to do something, rather than just angst over it and just say, well, it's a problem that I just don't know. So this is where the idea was born, basically. And it's grown over the past year plus. And it's almost like it's become the cabin itself, the model cabin that we toured around for 7 weeks.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's a focal point and a symbol of, the community. It's kind of a symbol of, this could be a safe place. We could find a safe place for people who are marginalized, to have nothing. And we believe that we can, with all the community partners we have, with the goodwill that we've established. And we think it's possible. We think it's affordable, and we think it's the only way. If something has to change.
Yeah. No, I think it's a beautiful plan. Go ahead.
Susan, obviously, first of all, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Path sounds like it's an interesting part of a kind of a cog of a wheel that we've got to put together for the homelessness, the poverty, all of the, the issues that are dealing with communities such as our own, but communities all across this province and in fact, this country. I think the biggest thing that I'm trying to stress with our audience, the community in and of itself, is that this is not something that, the planning committee from PATH has come up with, and we don't know if it's going to work, right? We're just kind of putting our finger in the air, licking it and hoping for the best. This is something that you folks have established through watching these other communities, watching this planning process, understanding some of the very strong assets that have occurred in some of these communities, and also looked at some of the failures, outright failures of some of these other communities, and said, let's not do this. So I guess my question ends up being is that you've had some tough times in the Peterborough Council chamber over the last couple of weeks. I would argue that some people in the community feel that PATH has not had necessarily a fair shake or necessarily been heard. What do you say to people out there that are hoping and that are still on your side, but what do you think your next steps are?
Well, that's a really good question. I think the expertise we have from within and the endurance and stamina we have from within is really what's helping us now. And as I said, the broad kind of spectrum of community, community will to just determine a path forward. I think, everyone from all the agencies to the police, to the emergency services, to the, the Brock Urban Clinic, to the VON, they recognize that it's not going to be an easy way. So we have to figure it all out together. And that's what we're trying to do, is stay together in it.
Well, I think, Susan, that's where a lot of this, and we've talked about this with you earlier, and we've talked with some of the other guests about kind of some of the messaging that, you know, Path is working on right now and getting that information out. And when we had Scott on earlier last week, one of the things that I thought was fantastic, and the way that he explained, was kind of the wraparound continuum that is kind of essential to the success of Path. So having supports, having social workers, having a place so that, you know, someone from social services is able to come down and utilize their time more efficiently, where they're not going to 15 different sites trying to look in a tent to try to find and help somebody to get some supports. These are things that I don't think that the average community member looks at, thinks about, or quite frankly, cares, right? And that's where I'm trying to understand. And I'm trying to get this messaging across that, and you, someone who's been on the front line of doing this, what does that mean for your job? If you're able to go to one small community little area, what kind of supports of you, what can you do to help these people when they're unified in one area as a community?
Well, certainly it's more efficient. It's easier. You can provide more service for more people, because you can often work with people together if they're in a space together.
Right.
But also for the people, there's something, we're not talking about just plunking a cabin there in isolation. A big part of the model is the peer support that's involved. Sure, you have the services that are provided as needed, and the people coming into this program will be people with high needs, complex needs, what the service providers called high acuity. Right. People who are outside, who aren't able to do in the shelters or in regular housing. They're stable enough to, so they're not, you know, they need a specialized kind of support. It's trauma-informed care, because there's no one out there that hasn't, at the very least, dealt with severe trauma. So it's going to take an adjustment period. There's all that. So the people, a big part of it will be the peer support. And the operating partner, the main partner that we, among our work with all the agencies over the past year, to make relationships and connections with them, to educate them about what we want to do and get their support, they're going to be able to extend their services from their agencies. So maybe Forecast or CMHA or the MSORT, the mobile outreach, they will know where the cabins are. They'll know, and they'll probably know most of the people. So they'll be able to extend their services and go and see the people there, which they'd be going out and trying to see anyway. And our main partner will be the Elizabeth Fry Society, who we're making an agreement with. We will be contracting with them because their model suits, we think, what our folks will need, you know, will best be suited to, because a high number of their staff in their housing programs and their other programs are people with lived experience themselves. So they're going to be able to relate to the people that are dealing with mental health and addictions issues. They're going to be able to have the best chance of helping people get stabilized, so that then they can have a chance of moving to a better place in their life. Nothing's going to happen when you're living in a tent or in a doorway. There's no way you're going to be able to. You're just surviving.
So how does Elizabeth Fry Society come on board in a contractual situation in that thing? Is this something that Path is going to be budgeting and a line item that they'll be paying for some of these social workers? Or is this going to be a situation in which Elizabeth Fry, through the government funding, is going to be picking this up? Is it through the city? How does that kind of break down?
Well, we're working on that. But I mean, Elizabeth Fry has numerous housing, different programs that they already do housing. So they can, some of it will overlap, because they're going to be heavily involved in the selection process, probably doing most of it because they're on the street now. So part of their staffing will come from what they already have, but we will have to, Path will provide a big part of it, you know. And we've also entered into a financial partnership with the Broad Commission in terms of us being able to now accept donations and provide through them a charitable receipt. And we have people we know that have been waiting this whole time for that, to be able to make some substantial donations, and maybe some people will make them for a cabin, to build another cabin. Maybe some groups or individuals will donate to provide one of the communal spaces that we'll have to have. We're about to buy a sort of a trailer that's in really good shape, but we're going to finish up to make into kitchen, showers, communal area. We're going to have 2 of those on site in the center of where the cabins are, the communal spaces for services for the people. So, this is a pilot project, and this is not the permanent vision. This is phase 1. This is a solution to get people, inside, to help get people stabilized, start the healing process, start being connected to supports, probably being on the city's by name list for homelessness, so they'll be recognized. Accessing all the services to have health and well-being is the first stage, and to wake up in the morning. I mean, we're worried about people right now out there. Last week we lost a 50-year-old man outside of his tent who froze. So people are not surviving. And it's not an easy go. And we've heard from the other places, sure, there's bumpy roads and there's things that aren't perfect and ups and downs. It's a roller coaster, but also people make great strides when they have that kind of support and stability, and a door they can lock, and a bed they can sleep in, and a place to store their belongings and food in their belly and medicine.
Yep.
And not frostbite, and be able to see a doctor or get their glasses fixed,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Scott was saying last week, that a lot of it is having a place to stay, not having all your stuff stolen when you leave. He was also talking just recently in Toronto under a bridge. I think there was a fire because they were using something to heat. So that's always a danger. These little trailers come with heaters, so it's a lot safer. And the whole, like, the gentleman who died because he froze to death, unfortunately, that's going to be a concurrent theme, I'm sure. Is there, so, like, they want, what Scott seemed to think is the most important is that there's a stable structure where you can lock your door and you can go to work, and there's actual money that they will be paying from their that they will almost be like they're paying a rent to the tiny homes.
Yeah.
Is that something that they do in Kitchener and Texas and Kingston?
Yeah, most people would, likely be on OW or ODSP, so they would
Right.
pay their shelter allowance, which would be the equivalent to rent, as a program fee, basically. They would be a resident. They would be taking part in a program with all the supports involved, but that would be paid directly once they enter the program, which would help people. They wouldn't have to worry about that. That would be paid. And, everything, other basic needs would be provided. So.
And then the Fry Society, you were saying that they've already lived that kind of thing. Like, so are a lot of people in the Fry Society, they were homeless at one time, they suffered from mental health? Is that what you mean by they've shared in the experience before?
Some people have dealt with addictions. A variety of things, but they believe in the, their model is based on, the people with the lived experience in some ways are the experts.
Yes.
On recovery. And also a lot of people that are outside are afraid of institutions for a variety of reasons. When I was working, a lot of people had been in long-term institutional care, and when there was the big release of, closing mental health beds and everybody coming out of the hospitals, They were terrified of everybody, and they were terrified of going in anywhere, thinking that they would once again be locked up or institutionalized.
Yeah.
And that's a mindset, and it would evolve sometimes into a full-blown illness. And so it's a real, that's why I say trauma informed, because I never met one person with a serious mental health issue that didn't have the most extreme kinds of trauma that you wouldn't want to know about.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why we have to realize there's going to be a transition. You can't say, okay, you're going to come in the cabin for 3 months and then you should be stable, and then it's time to go out and get a job or go.
Right.
It's not that easy, but you have to give people the time and space. And we saw that in that film from Texas. People would come into a cabin and they couldn't even sleep in the bed. They'd sleep on the steps outside, or they'd sleep on the floor because they were afraid. They couldn't believe that it was their space and that someone wasn't going to come and hurt them or take it away from them. We don't think that way. We think from a middle class lens. We don't have that experience. So we have to rely on people that have experiences that we don't have to guide us through it. And that's something we're trying to do. We've done a lot of, we need to do more, but we've tried to do some surveying of people. We had a couple of gatherings at Emmanuel Church of people that were homeless, experiencing homelessness, or had been recently. And we tried to, invite them in for a coffee chat, and we showed the film a few times and asked them what they thought, what would they like it to be like? What do they think the rules should be? Would they live there? Who wouldn't they want for a neighbor? Who would they want? Those sort of things.
So Susan, this is something that you folks have been working on for, if I'm getting this right, the better part of a year and a half?
Yeah.
So the last year and a half, are you finding that you're getting traction now because we got some of that white stuff out front and a lot of people are like, oh, wow, this is real? Or is this something that, like, how have we come to this point where it seems like you folks are a bit of a topic for the community? Do you think that it's just where you guys are in your planning process, or do you think that people are like, yeah, no, it's winter, we got to figure something out?
Well, I think it's come to a head now as it's winter. It's come to a real desperate feeling, not just with us, but our other folks that are doing the outreach out there, all the agencies that are working there, out there every day. So it really has come to a head. But I really think when we took the cabin around for all those weeks and we handed out material, we told people about our vision, our plan. We gave them the stuff. We gave them our email. Now we have a website that's just, we have a great person that's starting to help with that. And now we have a way to accept the donations, as I was saying. So
Correct.
It's built up to that. And then we had a rally, that big rally a couple of weeks ago. We had 250 people, and we had incredibly moving speakers, and not just from PATH. Crystal from Kingston, who I referred to, she came and spoke about how they got started. We had Migwa Disease, a young woman that just won the YMCA Peace Medallion, who's out there, who's an activist who's out there. We had poets, we had spoken word people who with lived experience. We had songs. We had Father Leo, our mentor and spiritual advisor, really preaching to the converted, I think, but saying, talking about how, it's a human, housing is a right for all of us, and none of us want to see our neighbors suffering, and we're just seeing so much suffering, young, old, in between people, and so that was really uplifting. So it feels like it's been like a bit of a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
That was such a enormous thing.
I was at that event. Sorry, Susan. I was at the event, and what I found most motivating was that no one was like attacking the Parliament or Jeff Leal or the council. Everyone kept on saying things like we're not against what the council is deciding. We want to work with them. That anything that we can do to help, and anything they can do to help us, is super important. That like speech after speech after speech, even with Father Leo, he talked about how they need the support of Jeff and the other council members, and that it sounded like you had the support of some of the council members. Like some of them have already started kind of pushing your agenda. I know Jeff has tried to push the football down to February, I think. He's in a tough spot right now, I think, because we don't have any land. I don't think right now. Like you said something about one of the land that you thought you had might not. There might not be some follow through with it, unfortunately, because it's taking too long.
I think that offer's really not on the table as we understand now. So
Yeah.
It's kind of back to the drawing board. Over the winter, we've met with the housing people, with the Commissioner of Community Services. They've been saying they've been keeping their eye out for us. We've made some suggestions, but they haven't been accepted by the city. And we do know there's so many, if it's municipal land, there's so many planning issues, zoning, bylaws. There's so many things that have to be just perfect.
Right.
To meet their requirements. In other communities, I mean, some of them in Kitchener, they just at one point they just did it, and then the community sort of followed afterwards. But that's that works.
Now this was on the land of the municipality where they just did it.
No, they had a really amazing benefactor. Ron Joyce, his name was, and this woman Nadine, she'd actually was bringing people into her corner store that were outside in the cold, and then she got shut down for doing that. She had a whole bunch of people coming in and sleeping inside her little store. They came and shut her down for that, and this lovely man, he said, "Oh, I've got a piece of prop. Just come on over here and put your tents up." So they did.
Right.
And then that's how they sort of started. And then they found a way to make a temporary use bylaw that would sort of buy them some time till they could get things in place. And they had to move a couple of times, and that's typical. Oftentimes, programs will have to move a couple of times before they land on where they want to be. Like now, Kitchener is on a little strip of land. It's partly school board property and part municipal, and they've come to a good understanding. It has the school board office as a neighbor. It doesn't have any neighbors, that it will interfere with, I suppose. And then it's just on an unused little area, and that seems to, for now, have worked out okay. So
now it seems like, Susan, where you bring up a very interesting point there when you talk about the neighbor situation. So was that Kitchener or Kingston that had the school board as the neighbor?
Kitchener, they're on. The school board offices are just sort of off in the background over there. And
so it feels like that's where in the community where we are here, it seems like one of the pushbacks for your proposals are neighborhood related, right? It seems like the most outspoken advocates for their community themselves, their area themselves, are against where that planning was, and now apparently that deal has fell through and going from there. What do you say to communities that are concerned like that? What is the message from PATH to a concerned group of citizens that are saying, I'm not sure I want this 3 doors down, or I'm not sure I want this 3 blocks down, or 3 miles down, or 3 hectares down? What does this look like, and what would be your messaging in that type of situation?
Yeah, good question. And we have given the message out. When we did the cabin tour, we did have a couple of people that kind of stormed in really red hot to us saying, I live around there. If you're thinking of coming there, and don't do it because of this and this, and saying that they had people around already in behind where the location was, and telling us about all the problems. So talking after a while, though, people actually realized that maybe what we were offering would be more of a solution. That actually what happens is the problems they're talking about don't occur as much, because people have a safe space to be. They're inside. They're not they're not hungry. They have support. If they're, whatever they need, there's someone there. You have these wraparound services. You have a safety plan. You have someone to call. And we were ready to do a neighborhood notification, but we didn't have the approvals for the land use, for the zoning. We didn't have a change of use. We were still working on that. And we were advised, you don't, until you know it's going to be there. But word gets out. So people had heard that maybe it was going to be there. And already, a lot of people were concerned about it. Our plan was to bring one of our model cabin onto the property and have, besides knocking on doors and talking to people and addressing their concerns, we were going to have sort of an open house and invite people in again, as we did in our cabin tour, but invite the neighbors in to talk, to see what we were doing, to share information. And oftentimes, most of the people we talked to, then they said, okay, well, that doesn't sound quite as worrisome as I thought, once they kind of understood. But as you were saying, Patrick, there clearly is a lot of people that don't have the message out. We've tried to get it out, but we need to do a better job, and we're working on that. But
we sure are.
Yeah, as I was saying to Scott there last week, the only frame of reference that we have is Tent City. So like when you say you're going to get 10 homes together, small homes, and they're all going to be on the Jack McGee land, and the only frame of reference we have is what Tent City looked like. Like people are going to be like gathered out front of the apartments. There's going to be like needles everywhere. There's going to be garbage everywhere. It's going to be very messy. There'll be no security. When it was at Confederate Square there, it was very loud and a party-like atmosphere. So that's the only frame of reference I think people have, and really it's the messaging that we have to change, because that's not what you're promoting. That's not what you're thinking is going to happen. That's not what is happening in Kitchener and Kingston. And really, I think people just don't know that won't happen, because that's what they're expecting. That's what they know, right? That's what it's always been.
Yeah. And part of the models that we've seen that works well is when there's expectations of people.
Yeah.
You can't expect people to stabilize and get housing, they use the term housing ready. The goal is to have people gradually get ready to move on to a permanent kind of housing, whether it's our phase 2 permanent tiny home village that we hope to get to, or, apartment, whatever, other kind of housing. They have to have practice. And that means, helping with the maintenance on the property, doing things, being responsible for your own, making sure your cabin is clear, okay, and clearing a path. There has to be a fire route through. You can't have, sometimes people will hoard stuff and hold on to stuff because they had stuff. So they'll gather stuff, but then you can only have so much. So there's all these things. But it's about respect and dignity for everyone. And when you have neighbors, that's something. When you can have your little, front spot to sit out, and you can say hi to your neighbor, and you can look, there's something about the dignity of having your own place and keeping it, and some pride in that, that you don't have when you're in a stacked apartment building or something. There's something about a neighborhood. It's small, it's tiny, and it's not a full house. It's a cabin, but it's still your home for now. So that's part of the learning and the education. We're going to have training opportunities for the residents in all kinds of scenarios based on what their needs are. And EFRI and the staff there they're going to be very good at doing that, because they're going to understand the addictions piece, all the things that people are going to need to work on, and what they're going to need to learn about, and the resources they're going to have. So, and we have over, 150 plus volunteers on our list. We just had a big meeting with them. We have people that really want to offer their skills, their help, whether it's with food services and teaching things or the arts or gardening, having a massive community garden, which
Right.
is what they had in the community first model. And people learned about eating healthy. All these things are all about well-being. And then they gradually brought in the outside community and saying, okay, well, I'm a mechanic. I'll help in the shop, help teach people how to work on cars or something. And then people all start to break down the barriers and know each other just as people and not be afraid to make that connection, because we all have preconceived ideas about what
Right.
the other is, the other, someone that's not like us. And a whole lot of people have never had the chance or maybe not been comfortable speaking to a person that's living rougher out there, because it's an unknown. But it's a beautiful thing when you see what it can grow into. And it's, some people have moved into these communities that weren't homeless before, but they want to be part of this community as a volunteer. They want to live in it because it's more like a neighborhood than their own neighborhood.
Right.
And that says something. Not only are they not afraid, they feel good about contributing, being part of, and sharing with a new neighbor that they had no knowledge about.
Yeah.
And knowing them, where they come from, how they got to where they are, because everyone has a story, right?
Right.
Absolutely. Everyone has a story. I think it's great that you're going to use like maybe carpenters and mechanics and probably like roofers and all sorts of things that your community will have, cooks and sewers, and if you can get that neighborhood together and you can get those people working together and they feel safe, where they can help each other out, I think that's a beautiful thing. And I really look forward to seeing what Path's going to do. And I think if we can keep getting this message out, if we can do more interviews like this one, we can really ease some fears. Because right now, I think a lot of people are afraid, and I think the biggest path that we're facing right now is that there's no place for these homes. And I think that the more we look into it, I think the more that we can pressure our politicians. If you're out there right now and you want to send a letter to one of our politicians, I think that's important. A nice letter, like you don't have to assault them or yell at them or scream. We're not looking for that. What we're looking for is like a nice form letter that you can ask your Jeff Leo or any of the other politicians for help, that you want rezoning, that you want a place to put these tiny homes. Patrick, is there anything else?
Well, I think, Susan, is what you folks are doing is a fantastic thing. I think that, like we've said before, is that there's a bit of a messaging issue on what that looks like. And that's where we came in. When we first started with this, James and I, we've been doing this Soaring Prophets here for a little while. And we thought about doing a charitable golf tournament or something in the summer. And we thought, hey, what's going on right now in our community? And we kind of jumped on and was like, hey, this Path thing, this could get legs. Like there's an opportunity here for something that's really homegrown initiative. And it sounds like you guys are tackling it head on. Over the last couple of weeks, obviously we've been doing these interviews with you folks and have kind of, pulled back the curtain, the Wizard of Oz type curtain of how it all runs and the structure. And then when I go outside of these interviews with you folks, the message in the community is very different. And that's where I think we've really got to focus on trying to get exactly what we talked about here tonight. We got to focus on getting some energy built up around this and what potential this could mean for our community. And not just the little house community of what it's going to look like, but something that people can really buy into. And right now, it feels very much as if people are like, that's a peripheral problem. Romaine lettuce is $9 at the grocery store. I've got problems too. And this is where I think that if we can figure out a way to continue having these dialogues, these discussions, and pushing those hard conversations, I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I thank you. I thank Path and what you guys are doing. I think you guys are doing a fantastic work. And I hope that this, garners some traction and gives us an opportunity to have even, and I'm going to say something that's probably not going to be super popular with Susan, but even if this doesn't happen the way that we want it to right now, whether that's, we're going to be looking at another year, however that all fleshes out. I think that, when we talk about this, we're shedding some light on a very real problem. And it kind of leads to my next kind of discussion point is the alternatives to what you guys are doing, it seems like are shutting down by the minute. Am I wrong in saying that? Like the warming rooms and all that?
Yeah, well, as you said, we just see ourselves, there's no one solution. It's a community problem, needs a community-wide solution. And this is just one option for some people. It doesn't fit everyone. And we feel like we've become really partners with these people that I wasn't as aware of, because I was in the system. I didn't have as much time to connect with, but I mean, and agencies like One City that did the warming room or warming room idea last winter, or the overnight drop-in, they're really trying to do it. E-Fry, there's all kinds of outreach.
Tell me a little bit about the warming room situation here in town.
Well, there was a group of agencies that were really concerned, and they tried to have some meetings directed to the emergency winter response, just trying to come up with a strategy. And they did that back in the fall, I guess. And then I'm not sure what all the confusion was, but at first there was an idea by the city staff that there was some money available, maybe $200,000 or something, or for that. And then because of the election, they couldn't allocate the money, and then it wasn't available. They couldn't do anything about it. So the idea sort of fell through. So then everything was dropped.
Okay.
So that's why it was revived, and it was brought forth in this term by the new council, but it's now been voted down twice. So
you're telling me, just so I can get a synopsis, you deal with this every day. So I want to break this down for people that have no idea what this is. A warming room is usually, and in my experience, it's been like a church type facility, just a generic public facility where people are able to escape the freezing cold temperatures throughout the evening. Am I wrong in saying that?
Yes, in Trinity United Church, which was purchased by the Poverty Reduction Network, they're going to be doing some sort of a big development. I think it's going to be a community center, maybe some sort of detox. They've got big plans for it. Run by the Poverty Reduction, I think, affiliated with some of the people that run the Mount. Okay. Anyway, that's empty now because they haven't started doing that. So they've offered that space, and I think that was a condition when they bought it. There was an idea, that would be great, perfect to have the warming room. So when the first,
why can't we just open up the Evan Root Arena at night?
I don't know.
No, part of the problem is what I've been told is that then you're having people sleep on the ground. It's not safe for a homeless situation because it's not really a safe location for everyone to just be sleeping on the ground in there. In the other warming rooms, it's about 4 hours, I think. And then you come in, you get a sandwich, you get a drink, you get coffee. It's not really meant for a nighttime sleepover. It's more meant to get out of the cold from I think it's midnight till 6 a.m., something like that.
I think the issue is that it can't be officially a sleeping area because it's not a shelter. We have shelters. We do not have enough shelter space, but we do have shelters. But there may be cots for people to rest, but there can't be blankets or anything because it is not an overnight sleep space. But the reality is that even if we had our 15 cabins on the ground tomorrow, there's still hundreds of people outside. So those people in winter, if we have nothing else for them, just a place to go inside, as you said, Patrick, to to stay alive overnight. That's what's being asked. So that last night, it was a tie vote, and one counselor couldn't vote because he had worked for the poverty reduction. Anyway, he had to excuse himself. So it ended up being a tie, and that's considered a lost vote. So that was unfortunate. I felt they had an array of speakers, delegations come up, and some of them, it was just unbelievable. It was very moving and really heartbreaking. Some of the, delegates, their stories and things, really imploring them to please, fund that. They were asking for some funds. And I think there was someone from the police community engagement. They even came up with half the funding. The police community program had pitched in and was going to fund the staffing for it. So I don't know what will happen. I think that there'll be a shoestring budget that agencies will come up with, and they'll try to do sort of a little program because they just don't know what else there is. There isn't.
What is the liability of these programs? So for instance, you're talking about Trinity United, Emmanuel and Church, all these other organizations. Why don't we put something together where the priest leaves the door open for us and we just go in there at midnight? Like, what is the liability that we're having where these organizations are going, no, this is a problem? Because to me, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that the liability outweighs the positivity, and that we're concerned about if something happens.
Exactly. And all organizations, well, not all, but institutions are risk averse, and that's a lot. You'll hear counselors will ask that question because they want to know what's the insurance, what's the liability for it.
Right.
Yeah.
But you know what is the risk of not doing anything, really not acting? I think many people, sometimes you have to take a leap of faith, don't you, and just say, what's the worst can happen? Let's go for it. We're all in it together. Let's do something. And
other than the mental health situation, I don't see a problem with the warming rooms. You really do need supports in there, because I know people come in with different variant mental health issues. And if you have a bunch of people in a small space that don't feel safe and become triggered because they have different mental health problems, that can be a serious issue. But I still think it's important that we get them off the streets into the warm. And if you have like Elizabeth Fry or someone inside the churches to help, or even the priests or some of the ministers that have, they've been trained how to deal with stuff like that, I think that would be super important. But I think that's part of the problem. Part of the problem is that mental health wise, we don't have the supports for a midnight to 6 a.m. thing. When
I'll be there. I know what to do. I'm not paid for it anymore, but there's people, Path wouldn't have started if it wasn't for people. I mean, we've got hundreds of years of experience all combined.
Right.
It started with mainly a group of vintage women like myself, and there's all kinds of people that have the skills. And
yeah,
I mean, I volunteered at Carol's Place. Do you remember Carol's Place? It wasn't overnight, but when we had Carol's Place in memory of Carol Winter, who was a lovely lady, street advocate that helped people for years. And we had a drop-in, and we had not one police call. It wasn't overnight, but people said at the time, you can't just have people dropping in for a coffee all day, and all kinds of people that you don't know. And we didn't have one. I'm not saying it wasn't bumpy the odd time, but we didn't have any big problem. We had no issue of violence. People were so happy to be there and to come in out of the cold and to have someone to talk to, and have maybe someone say, okay, I'll walk up to the courthouse with you, or I'll take you here, or I'll buy you a sandwich, or whatever, I'll give you a ride. I mean, and we couldn't keep it going. We got evicted. We couldn't use the space, and then we couldn't get anyone to rent us a new space.
Right.
So, because people were like, oh, the same thing. liability, what's going to happen if, maybe it won't be good. Sometimes you just got to go. The other option is worse. People will not survive. Housing is a human right. It is for all of us. And it's not easy to get it anymore in this city. It's way too expensive. A lot of people like you or I are struggling with paying the bills right now, but there's got to be a better way. And we're just trying to come up with some creative solutions, be part of the larger community that's doing the same, and say, let's do it together and as quickly as we can. And Jeff Leal's he came out to the cabin. He brought people out all the time. He's talked to us. I believe that he really wants to find a solution. He wants to bring members of council together. He wants to use the expertise and the experience of the new people. We have people on the new council with lived experience themselves that are going to bring a voice that needs to be heard. And we've got to listen there. We've got to balance all that out. So I think it's doable. I have to believe it's doable.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you're saying in regards to there's a will here. I think there's an execution problem when it comes to what council is concerned about. Like they're trying to mitigate and manage the expectations of their constituents, as well as manage a population of a community that's kind of on the fringes of society. So trying to drive that re-electability is hard. Like they're trying to figure out where can we put this? Well, I don't know if the West End wants it, and I'm probably going to get a lot of really nasty emails if I put it out there. Like I look at the situation out at Fleming College. Like when we had some warming rooms and shelters out there, it didn't take long for that to not be a thing anymore. And that's where I think that you have an electability problem and a messaging problem. And I think Susan, you coming on here tonight, having this dialogue with us, every time we talk with someone of Path, we get a little bit deeper and a little bit more informative as to why this seems like there's a real potential in this. And that it's not just a situation where it's, we're all going to sit around and sing Kumbaya, right? This isn't just some wildly outlandish program that a couple of people have come up with. This is being executed. It's being executed all across the province. You're saying, nationwide, especially down into the States as well. You guys are not reinventing the wheel and feeling and hoping. This has the potential for traction. And where we are right now is that we've got to figure out with a multi-pronged approach what our next moves are. And Susan, I want to thank you for coming on here tonight. For those of you that do follow us and do have an opportunity to help with Path, get on their website, subscribe, and share, get their content going. I think the biggest thing that we're doing right now is we have to win hearts and minds. The more people that we can get that are watching this sort of content, that are listening to this, kind of opening a little bit more of their mind's eye as to what these neighbors of ours in our communities. And I think that's the messaging. This can't just be these guys are homeless guys that living by a tent down by the river. This has to be our neighbors. And until we identify and clearly change that messaging, we're going to be at loggerheads with parts of the community around a solution. And this is where I'm really hoping that if you want to write an email or pen a letter to your council person or the council here in Peterborough, politely, obviously, more flies with honey than vinegar. So let's try to work together positively. But I think that you're having real opportunities for dialogue here. And that's subscribe, and share. Get this content moving. Send it to somebody that you think that would be interested in this. Send it to your grandkids. Send it to people that have an opportunity to check in on this and go, hey, I'm working on a project at school and we're talking about this. I'm at Trent University and we're talking about a diversity and inclusion aspect of things. This is huge. But if we don't spread the message, if we don't get this messaging out, we're way behind the eight ball. And this is the website that James has pulled up here right now.
And do you have the address? pathptbo.org is our new
right there.
Yeah. And if people want to donate, you can go to the Brock Mission website, and under Canada Helps, you can donate to Path you have to put the line Path Project, and they're taking donations on our behalf until we have our own charitable status. So we are incorporated, but we don't have our charitable status yet.
Okay, so just so I'm hearing this right, is that you can donate to Path Action for Tiny Homes Path via an e-transfer that's the email address, so you can send that directly, or you can send a check to the Brock Mission, and as long as you're putting in the memo line that this is for Path, that they're honoring that donation.
Yeah, that's just our, yeah, that's right.
Okay, great. Now, obviously, Susan, this is something that's very, time sensitive, and what you guys are doing right now. If there's people that are watching this, what is something that you folks need immediately?
Well, we need donations for our common buildings. We have our cabins, that's set, but besides our staffing funding that we're going to need, we need these communal buildings like this trailer that's costing us $6,500 for a used trailer that we have to retrofit for one building. We need that, and then we need a space for washrooms. So those donations are really helpful right now.
Okay.
You can email us if you have an interest in volunteering, if you have a special skill. As I said, we're going to be having training sessions for volunteers in all capacities, because we're going to need food service. We're going to connect with a lot of the church groups that do things for like One Roof and those food services, because depending on where we are and what our facilities are, we may have to at the onset bring food onto the site. So we'll be looking at volunteers for that. So,
yep.
Yeah. And
fantastic, Susan. Well, first of all, again, I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight. Those of you who follow us, the Profiteers, as we go out there from Soaring Prophets, that's our little, gang of merry followers that we have. Get out there. I think that this is a real opportunity, as we come into the Christmas season and that giving season. I think that this is something, whether this is, a donation in somebody's name, whether this is a donation of your time, of your family's time, getting out there and helping these folks. I think there's going to be something in it, for everybody. You're going to put a lot of smiles on a lot of people's faces, and that's super important this time of year. So, Susan, this is where kind of when we wrap up these conversations, James and I both have like a little send off. So I told you at the beginning of this that there's no gotcha questions. We're not, scary by any means, but we always stick our guests right at the very end with leaving us with the last word of something, a little bit of wisdom, words to walk away from. So my sign off is I kind of do more of the finance and the business stuff with all of our profiteers. So my send off is very kind of monetary. So as always, folks, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Let's make some money together, and I'll toss it over to James to wrap up, and then Susan.
So Thursday night, we're going to talk with Derek, who is a addiction survivor. He will be talking to us about some of the writing that he does for to help others deal with their addictions, which is kind of on par and on message with what we've been talking about tonight. He I believe he talks about how he was homeless and had some problems of his own, and he's just a successful person now, and we look forward to his messaging. Susan, I think what you're doing is amazing. I think every time we chat, whether it's you or one of the other PATH members, the steering committee, we always learn more, and I think it's always unique and interesting. And I think the more we talk, the more we can alleviate the stress and the worry. And I know that I'm more okay with you guys should be able to put up your houses wherever you want. Let's heal our minds, bodies, and souls together.
Thanks for having me. A quote that I heard in the film I was describing is, "The only thing worse than homelessness is hopelessness."
Nice.
So come on, let's do this together.